welcome back to TradTalk, Brazilian Translation Podcast. Today I'm here in Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais. I'm currently attending the Ergonomics and Technologized knowledge work, Cognitive Effort, Creativity and Health Issues. It's a workshop organized by UFMG, Minas Gerais, the Federal University of Minas Gerais, in cooperation with the Zurich University, ZHAW, Zurich University of Applied Sciences. And today I'm here with Professor Maureen Ehrensberger-Dow. Welcome, Professor Maureen.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to host you at the podcast. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. She's one of the organizers, along with Professor Fábio Alves from UFMG. So I'll introduce her a bit and then we'll talk about how the workshop, the idea of the workshop came. So Professor Maureen is a professor of translation studies at the Zurich University. She's Canadian and she has moved to Switzerland in 1985 because she got married to a Swiss. She has an undergraduate degree in psychology, an MSc and a PhD in psycholinguistics. She taught English and translated from German into English before teaching at what used to be called the Zurich Translation College, that later became part of the Zurich University. And she currently works with translation research as well as being a professor of translation studies. So Maureen, tell us a bit more about what you do.
Okay. Our University of Applied Sciences has a mandate to do things that matter to society. It's supposed to be applied. So we prepare people to go out and actually work. We're not preparing people for academic careers necessarily. It can be part of that, but it's mostly to go out and take on jobs, which is why we teach translation and interpreting. Because in Europe, there is lots of work for translators and interpreters.
Right.
What I teach is, I teach on the BA program. We have a BA program in applied languages, and we have an MA program in applied linguistics with three specializations. One specialization is specialized translation, so technical translation. We don't do literary translation. There's maybe lots of work in literary translation, but as you probably know, there's no money.
Yeah.
It's a labor of love.
Yeah.
But there's lots of work for people who are trained to do financial translation, to work for banks, people who are trained to work for industry, pharmaceuticals, very important in Switzerland. So our focus is very much on specialized translation. And there's another strand of conference interpreting. We prepare people to work at the UN or for conference work. Some of our graduates go on to work at the EU as interpreters. And we have a third specialization in organizational communication. And our goal of combining these three strands was making sure that industry understood what language needs there were and how professionals could help them with the language needs. It's still a fairly young program, but we're hoping that will have an impact.
Yeah.
Because as you probably know, translation gets thought about at the very end.
Yeah.
It's not usually incorporated early in the process, and that's what we're trying to teach people, that it would be wise to think about language issues at the very beginning of any kind of communication process. My research started out with products, looking at translations, because we have, I don't know if you know very much about the Swiss context, but there are 4 national languages in Switzerland. And a lot of people think one of them is English, and that's not true.
Yeah.
We call English the 5th national language. It's an unofficial language, but lots of people can speak it and use it very well. But German is the largest language. It's not the same German that's spoken in Germany. We have a situation that's called diglossic. I don't know if you are familiar with that term. The idea of a diglossic situation is that there are basically two languages that are in parallel, but in our case, Swiss German is spoken but not written.
All right. Okay.
And when the children come to school, they have to learn to write and read Standard German, which is very different. And when Germans come to Switzerland, they can't understand Swiss German.
Oh wow.
It's very, very different. Swiss Germans can understand Germans because they learn German in school.
Yeah.
So we have this very special situation of 4 national languages: German, French, Italian, and do you know what the last one is?
No.
Most people don't. It's Romansh. Romansh?
Romansh?
Yes. It's like a vulgar Latin. It's when the Roman troops moved up through the Alps from Italy, some of them stayed. And it's their old dialects.
All right.
So it's actually highly related to Portuguese.
Yeah, because it's Latin.
Exactly. So a friend of mine who lives in that area is Portuguese, and he learned Romansh very quickly. It's very related to Catalan. Probably for the same reason, because the Roman troops moved into Spain and some of them stayed as well, and Catalan developed that way. So we have this interesting mix of languages. We have people growing up in a very multilingual context. And I was fascinated by looking at the English production. So I had students writing in English, and I was sure that I could perceive if the person was an Italian speaker or a German speaker or a French speaker from the way they used English.
Interesting.
And because of my background in psycholinguistics, I find that fascinating. How you people manage to keep your languages straight, because you're constantly having to make sure that the other language is down, and then speak or write the language you're doing for your target audience. Which is a fascinating situation. And in Switzerland, we have all these people who can speak 3, 4 languages, and they're switching between the languages all the time. So that's how my research started. And then I got interested in translation processes. Again, it's what's happening in the mind. How do people go from one language to the other? They make decisions when there are so many different possibilities, perhaps, for a certain word. How do you decide which is the right one for that context? I thought that the hard part about translating were syntactic structures, grammatical structures, and strange content. The more I worked with translators, the more I found out that's what they liked. That was the fun part. I don't know what your experience is.
I wouldn't say it's fun per se, because it's quite complicated.
Exactly.
But we do get puzzled because we have to, translate the proper language. The most correct one. Like I usually like to say that it's our job to keep, like in our case, Portuguese language correct. So we shouldn't make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. So you have all these things. You have to do it the way your client is expecting you to do it. You have to be true to the language because you want to have good quality language. You have to be true to the meaning of the source, of course. I use the metaphor of juggling. You're juggling all of these responsibilities at once, which is an incredible load. And we started recording translators at their workplace, and we recorded what they were doing on the screen because we were very interested in where do they get stuck. Which parts of the text seem to cause them problems, where do they go back, what do they revise, which resources are they accessing, so are they using Google, are they using online dictionaries. The teachers who teach the practical courses complain that the students spend all their time looking at the online dictionaries, and that's wrong. And professionals don't do that. But our professionals do. And the professionals, that's the very interesting thing. Well, if you just look at a screen recording and you see the professionals going back and forth to the dictionary, you can think, oh my goodness, they're also using these online dictionaries, and why aren't they just thinking? But of course, they're using them for a different reason. Many times the professionals do have a good idea, and they use the dictionary to check or to see if there's another solution.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's your experience.
That's my case.
And the beginners don't know, and they go to the dictionary to find out. And then often they take the first choice, and of course it doesn't work. And the professionals are using those dictionaries in a very, very different way. So that was one of the first things we learned when we started studying the professionals. My research assistants were at the workplace at a language service provider for 6 months. They became part of the team. The translators talked to them a lot. And as a linguist, my idea, as I said, was that the tricky part, the difficult part, was picking the right word or syntactic structures. And then we discovered that for those translators, that seemed to be the part they liked about their job. That was the interesting part, challenging, but interesting. And what they didn't like is if the source texts were bad quality.
Yeah.
That was very stressful. If their computers didn't work the way they wanted them to work, that was very stressful. If somebody was talking on the telephone next to them as they were trying to concentrate, if it was too hot, if it was too noisy outside. So those were the things that caused them stress and affected their decision making, which was completely different from what I had expected as a language specialist, but it made complete sense to me with my psychological training. And then we started thinking, maybe it's the ergonomics of the situation. It's the way the office is set up. Maybe that's not good for some of these translators, and they're not doing as good a job as they could be doing when they talk to us about what bothered them. And that's how this whole idea for looking at the ergonomics of translation started.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because it's actually like a practical part of the translation work itself. And I think it's a current topic nowadays, like especially among translator professionals. It's not something that has long been talking. It's like recent. People are starting to worry more about ergonomics.
Yeah, because people are suffering health complaints. They realize their job is making them sick sometimes, and we can do things about that.
Yeah.
And that's what we were trying to find out.
All right. So that's how the idea of the workshop came up.
Yes. I had a project that ran for 4 years, and it was called Capturing Translation Processes. That was the one I was telling you about with the screen recording. And then out of that project came the idea for a project we called the Physical and Cognitive Ergonomics of Translation. And we worked together with occupational therapists. In German, they're called ergonomic therapists. And so they seemed the logical people to go to. We have a Department of Health and an Institute of Occupational Therapy, and I went and talked to them, and they thought this was an interesting idea. And they knew about computer workplaces, and they knew that lots of people didn't have them set up the way they should. So we developed this project together, and it was running for 2 years. We've just finished it recently and are still processing some of the data. And the reason, the Brazilian connection is an interesting one. I had met Fabio Alves many years ago with translation process research. I went and listened to a talk of his in 2008, and I thought, my goodness, I need to talk to that person because he's talking sense and he really knows a lot about this subject, which I had just started getting into because a colleague looked at writing processes, and I thought writing processes and translation processes are not so different. He studies journalists. Journalists look at lots of sources, they patch together sources, they're finding information on the net. This is what we do as translators, so maybe we need to compare these processes. So I came at it from a very different angle, and then I discovered there was a whole world of translation process researchers, and Fabio is one of the best. So I met that world. He's part of a network called TREC, Translation, Research, Empiricism, Cognition, which has a little logo, and there are people from all over the world that get together to talk about translation processes and how we can best understand them, how we can research them. And I was at a conference and walking towards the conference site with Fabio, and I said, I have this idea, and I don't know what you think about it, but I'm just working on a research proposal. And I told him a little bit about this idea of looking at the ergonomics, and he said, Maureen, that's a very interesting idea. And when Fabio says something is an interesting idea, I think it's a good idea. So that gave me confidence to pursue it. And I received the funding. As a University of Applied Sciences, we have to have all of our research funded externally. We don't have a base of research money. So we have to do things that the Research Foundation is interested in and the community is interested in. And I had quite a few translators who said they were interested in helping. the Swiss Translation Association was interested in the project because they said, yes, ergonomics, that's so important.
Yeah.
And I could write that into my research proposal, and I think probably that was why I got the funding. I also argued in the research proposal, and I believe this completely, that with translation we can see if there's a problem, because we can see on the screen if somebody starts making more typing mistakes, if they go back and forth, if they seem to lose their place on the screen, we can see if they're getting tired and losing concentration. If we want to study mathematicians, I don't know how to understand if mathematicians are getting tired, because many times they're thinking.
Yeah.
And computer scientists are doing all kinds of things, and maybe if I understood more about computer science, I could see if they were getting tired by what they're doing on the screen. But my argument in my proposal was that with translation we can see it and understand, because we understand both languages and we can see mistakes that are being made, or slips, or just evidence that people are getting tired. If you go back to the same site 3 times to check something, it suggests your short-term memory is having problems. And I don't know about you, but that happens to me all the time. So we argued that if we looked at translators in detail, we could understand what was happening in the brain under certain conditions, and we could apply that to other knowledge workers. And that's the idea of this workshop, is it's not just about translators, it can extend to knowledge workers in general. So I got the funding, we started the project, and then I had a sabbatical. And I had my sabbatical here at UFMG. And I worked with Fabio and his PhD students. It was a wonderful experience. And I had a PhD student who was running the project in my absence. So there's a Brazilian connection right there. Part of the project was an international survey of professional translators. I introduced the idea of the survey at FIT in Berlin, the International Federation of Translation. That was probably 3 years ago now, 2 years ago in Berlin. My colleague Gary Massey and I gave a presentation about our project, and at the end of the presentation we said we're planning to launch a survey next month. If any of you are interested in participating, please let us know. We're here the next 3 days, just tell us. And we were flooded with professionals. There were lots of professionals in the audience, and they rushed to the front to give us their business card and say, please send me the survey, which was fantastic for us. But we thought, wow, this is really an interest. This is something important. And these people acted as multipliers for us. We sent the survey link. We had the survey done in 6 languages, because if we're doing translation, we should have it in different languages. So Portuguese was one of the languages. And people from UFMG translated the survey, which was written in English. They translated it into Portuguese and checked it. So there was another UFMG link that way. And it was sent around to some translators here. And one of the poster sessions today is about the Brazilian results of that survey. At the end, there were almost 2,000 people who took part in our survey.
That's a lot of people,
It's a lot of people. And what impressed us so much and touched us was we received so many emails. It was a completely anonymous survey, but at the end, if you wanted the report or you wanted to say anything, there was an address that you could write to. And we had hundreds of professionals writing to us, thanking us for doing this research, which really moved us and made us convinced that this is important.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely important, because like you said in the beginning, it's something that is going to change, that not is going, but changes our lives.
Exactly.
Like I'm not like a no school translator. I'm recent. I have like 6 years of experience only. I think I'm a beginner. Still a beginner, but I have already had physical problems due to bad table positioning and desk positioning. So only those who already had problems, I think they do understand of the importance of ergonomics. And what I think was really interesting is it's that it goes beyond chair and desk.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It's not only that,
Exactly.
which is fantastic.
Yes, because if you're sitting at a computer screen, you saw the demonstration yesterday by the occupational therapist, and it's so interesting that as we get tired or we're concentrating, we automatically lean forward, and we're in the wrong position. So of course we're going to have problems. And there are very simple techniques to compensate for that, if you know. But if you're not aware of it, we don't see ourselves when we're working. So it's about building awareness, yes.
You just feel the results after
too long,
a long day or after a long period of having all those days of wrong positioning, wrong posture and everything, right?
And as they said yesterday, some very simple techniques like having little breaks every 20 minutes. And they're little breaks. They call them mini breaks. And in fact the EU, for their translators, have an app that you can install. And you can set the time and it'll bing every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes just to remind you, oops, it's time.
All right.
And some translators love it. Other translators don't like to be interrupted. But everyone can set it to their own needs.
Exactly. I think that each person has to see what's best for them.
Exactly.
What works best for them.
Exactly. And the settings, if you're using cat tools a lot, what we discovered in our survey is very few people actually change the default settings, even though you can. But unfortunately, some of those programs are so difficult to find out. We worked out to change one particular setting, you had to go through 8 steps. And you couldn't find out easily in the TradTalk handbook. You had to go to a forum to find out because someone had actually worked out how to do it. So I understand when people don't change settings. But it's impossible that the default settings are good for everyone. You have to find out what works for you.
Especially because in TradTalk, for example, some documents change the font size depending on the document you open. So sometimes the font is really tiny. You do have to do that to lean forward in order to see properly, and you can increase the font size. So you don't need to lean forward in order to see.
But we're, as humans, we're very silly sometimes, and we won't bother doing something because it just seems easier to deal with the situation the way it is. But if we insisted every time thinking, wait, is this good for me, or do I want it to be bigger? Should I change the font size, for example? It takes 10 seconds to change the font size, and then you're saving yourself problems.
Exactly. That is very good. Congratulations on your job, amazing job, research job, and the partnership with the university, the idea of the workshop, I think it was fantastic.
Well, it was only made possible actually by a funding organization in Switzerland. It's called, I have to read the title to make sure that I don't get it wrong, the Brazilian-Swiss Joint Research Program, and it's funded by the Swiss government. The idea is that the Swiss researchers' expenses are paid to have a workshop or they start a little project, and there's matching funds from the Brazilian partner. So UFMG has organized everything about the workshop. They've done a wonderful job, and the funding has paid for us to come over here.
All right. That is great. I think it's really interesting to listen to all those talks we had yesterday. We had a practical workshop where they demonstrated an occupational therapist, right? Demonstrated how to work on the computer, light, position of the screen. So it was quite interesting. And some things also I didn't know, for example, I always thought the position of the screen needed to be on eye level. And I was surprised, it shouldn't be on eye level. It's like one hand lower than eye level.
Exactly, because the natural position is for us to look down a little bit and not look up. So as soon as you realize you're looking up, this is not a good thing.
Exactly.
But the interesting thing about these recommendations, if you look at general computer work recommendations, those people don't know about TradTalk or some of the other translation memory. I showed a picture yesterday in my presentation, a screenshot of a translator's screen working on TradTalk, and if you can imagine a screen shaped about like this, the area that the translator was working on was way down here. Now, of course, those recommendations are based on the assumption that we're looking in the middle of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
But if translators are, because of their translation memory system, are looking way down in the right-hand corner, then maybe those recommendations are not so clever.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think about, okay, where is my head?
Yeah.
When I'm looking at the place I'm normally looking at, where is my head? And someone in our institute who is the head of our interpreting program and a freelance translator, he said he has his screen raised, and we said, the occupational therapist said, no, it's too high. And he said, well, wait a minute, but I look right there. And then the occupational therapist, aha, okay, no, for what you're doing, your screen actually is right. So you have to take these recommendations with a little bit of care and think about, okay, what is the principle behind it? Is the principle behind it that I'm looking slightly down where I'm looking? Then I adjust my screen accordingly, but not necessarily exactly.
Yeah, and especially because not all CAD tools are positioned the same way. There are other CAD tools that the memory is below.
That's right.
And the working space is above.
Exactly.
So it's the opposite of those.
Exactly. Or left, right.
Yeah.
Right and top and bottom, things like that. Exactly. Yeah. So you have to look at your situation and then, as I said, take the principles and then apply them.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Maureen.
You're welcome. I'm glad you're interested.
Yeah, I am. I am really interested, and the research itself is very practical. So it's not only data that we can apply to the pets side of it. So it's really interesting. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. We are now in the second day of the workshop. It starts in some minutes. And today we'll have some poster presentations, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll wrap up with the results. You talk about the research results. Are they online? Are they publicly accessible?
Some of them are. Some of them are published in journals that you need a subscription for.
All right.
I'm on Academia and ResearchGate, and when people write to me and ask me for my publications, I send them to them individually. I can't post those publications publicly because they're protected by copyright, and I respect that, of course. But we are allowed to send them for individual use as long as they're not distributed. So if anyone is interested in any of those, and otherwise on the project website, and I can give you that.
Yeah, and then I'll just post it below. All right. Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you very much for listening. Talk to you or see you if you're watching on YouTube on next episode. Bye bye.